Everybody, I am here in Reno, Nevada, and my little trip here is just about over. I'm heading back over to Sacramento for a little bit. But before I leave here, I wanted to check out one cool historical thing. And so I've decided to head on over to Fort Churchill State Park. And as far as I know, well, let me backtrack. I don't know anything about it. No clue. I'm going to learn everything while I'm there. So I've made it to the officers' quarters. That's what's behind me right now. Really cool. Now here I am at the barracks. This is where the regular old soldiers will be staying, as you can see behind me, right here. And if I stand back a little bit, you can see out in the distance there, over my shoulder, that's where the captain's quarters are. So, or the officers' quarters. So that's kind of how far they were from each other. Now these buildings here are made out of adobe, so not everything stood the test of time. For example, up yonder, there's a mess hall sign, but there's no mess hall. But here is another mess hall. Now, over on this side, right across the way, are some barracks. Now, right over behind me here are also barracks, but they're no longer here. Unlike the officers, the regular old soldiers in the barracks didn't have a good old time here. You know, life out here is isolated. There's nothing. It's a big old desert. The barracks weren't furnished or anything. It was just dirt on the floor. They had makeshift beds and chairs. All they had to eat was beef, salted pork, bread, and coffee. In terms of fun, all they really had to do was play cards, drink, fish in the river. For the most part here at Fort Churchill, there was about 100 soldiers, and there were only 2 barracks and 1 mess hall. However, by 1860, 6 barracks were up, but those were only partially made, which could explain why some are staying up and some are gone. I imagine that these ones that you see here are the ones that were built later in the years of time, and the ones that are no longer here are the ones that were used. So now where I am at is the guardhouse. The guardhouse is where basically the prisoners would be stationed if they were like drunks or something like that. Also, there was an office and a room for the guard to live. Now this is the powder magazine. As you can probably guess, the powder magazine is basically the armory. It's where all the gunpowder was stored, typically in barrels. Now here, as you can see behind me, right there, it kind of dives in, right? Well, that's the bakery. As I told you earlier, the majority of people's diets here was, meat and bread, and of course coffee, which you can always buy my coffee, Tranquilo Coffee, at tranquilocoffee.com. Put in code Ricky for 10% off. Now this building behind me is the biggest building on the fort. This was the hospital. It's small compared to most hospitals today, but it was the right size for the time and place, of course. Typically there would be about 20 at the maximum here in this hospital. There was only 1 surgeon and 1 matron. Now the surgeon, he was responsible for everything, including taking out the garbage. Now the laundresses' quarters are where the laundresses lived. Now for the most part, these laundresses were mostly women who were wives of the enlisted men soldiers that lived in the barracks. Laundry wasn't free. The soldiers, if they wanted their uniforms cleaned or anything like that, they would have to pay the laundresses to do that work for them. Now, behind me is the Subsistence Storehouse. Now, as you can probably figure out, that is basically the pantry. Next to the Sustenance Storehouse is the Quartermasters Storehouse of What the quartermaster was in charge of was all the building and stuff like that. So the Quartermaster Storehouse was basically like your modern day garage. Now this building, right behind me here, is what's called the commander's office. Now the commander's office was, as you can tell, an office, but it also was basically the Pony Express stop, post office essentially. And it had a telegraph machine in there which helped spread the news of the Civil War, President Lincoln's assassination, and the statehood of Nevada.